Hey dorks, it's Brock Boland, and today I'd like to show you the context layouts module and how it's used very quickly. This is a module that I only heard about recently, haven't really actually used it in production anywhere yet, and have only done some testing with it. The module is included with context. When you download the context module, you get context layouts. It's just something that I had never actually bothered to enable or try out before this week. What happens when you when you use this module is that you can choose which predefined layout you'd like to use in a context reaction. So for example, let me kind of show you some examples because this will be easier to explain once you see what I mean. I have just a dev site here that has a bunch of dummy content in it. This is the front page. It's just got a list of junk nodes, as you can see. And what I've done is defined a taxonomy for the number of columns to use for each node. So you'll see, 3 and 3 for that one, and this one is 1, and we have a 2. And these taxonomy terms are just used to trigger contexts. So for example, if I flip over to the next tab, here's one that is a 1-column node. You can see it's 1 right there. Here's my 2-column node. I have 2 columns with the content in the left and a couple of blocks in the right. And my 3-column node, this time with the content in the middle, sidebars on both sides. Nothing too groundbreaking here, but the way that it's implemented is pretty handy, and I expect to use this on pretty much every project that I do in the future. So let me kind of work backwards from the interface here to the code. You've seen the 3 different layouts I'm using and what they look like. If we look into the context list here, you'll see that I have a context for each of these 3 layouts. And let's just look at the 3-column for the time being. It's kind of simple. The condition, as I said, is based on taxonomy. I created this taxonomy to define how many columns to use for any given node. What happens when you install context layouts is that when you add a reaction for blocks, you'll get this new layout dropdown here, where you can select one of the predefined layouts that's available in your theme. And depending on which layout you choose, you get different regions into which you can drop blocks. So in this case, I'm choosing the 3 columns, so I have my main content and left and right sidebars. But if I change this to 2 column, this will switch to just be the right sidebar and the main content. So it allows you to choose, based on your layout, it allows you to choose which regions you're going to be using, in short, I suppose. So if I flip over to the code here, I've defined a bare bones theme. Obviously, if we go back to the browser, you can see I didn't bother doing anything to it except for adding some borders and things like that. But if we look at the theme, in my info file, for each different layout that's going to be available in the context layout module, we define a block of information with the layouts keyword definition. I'm not really sure what the term for these is, but you'll see we have layouts and then the name of this theme, and we have 1, 2, and 3, as you can see, and then a couple of different options we can set. Obviously, name and description are pretty straightforward. The style sheet that you specify here will be included when this layout is in use, so you can define a different style sheet for each of your different layouts. The same is true for a template. Basically, the template here will replace the page.tpl template. When this layout is used, instead of looking for page.tpl, it's going to look for layout 1col.tpl.php. And finally, you define the regions that are available in this particular layout. So in the first one, a single column, we just have content. 2 columns, we have content and right there. And of course, in 3 columns, we have content left and right. So let's take a look actually at the 3-column one. Just because it has 3 columns, there's a little bit more to see. So for example, if I am looking at this node, because this node has the 3 taxonomy term on it, the context, which we saw here, is triggered, which sets the layout to be 3-column. When that happens, the context layout module uses this definition in our themes.info file to determine what should happen. And as I said, it's going to use this template file instead of page.tpl. So if I open layout 3col.tpl.php, this is a really simple file in this case. What I did is I took the default page template file from the core and split it out into 3 pieces: the header, the footer, and the center content. So I have, you'll see I'm including header and footer.inc, which are just, the header is, of course, the start of the file, the footer is the end of the file, just so that we could use that on all of our different layouts. And then in the main content area is where we actually put our regions that we've defined for this layout. In this case, we have, of course, left content and right. I wrapped them in one div and then an inner div just so that I could so I could easily say that, for example, that like the middle section is 50%, the left and right are 25%, but still leave some padding and stuff like that. Not really important in this demo. I just wanted to explain what I was doing. And finally, because we defined a style sheet here, columns-3.css, this style sheet will be included when that layout is triggered. So I have a style sheet for each of my layouts that defines the different sizes for the different columns that are in use. In this case, the center content is 50, as I said, and then the left and right are each 25% of the full width of the page. If we look at 2, for example, it's two 50% columns, and the 1 is just one column. Not that difficult to figure out. So that's about it. That was the 3-column template that we looked at. If we look at the 2, it's just got a center and right, and of course the 1 just prints content, which is pretty much the same thing that a very basic page.tpl would do anyway. And actually, if we compare this, my page.tpl is the exact same thing, which you can see because if I flip between them, the code does not change. That's actually one important thing that I found when I was just whipping together this super basic theme. You do have to have a page.temple. This file. You need a page.templefif defined within your theme, or else it will not use these other layout template files. It's something in the theming that I can't remember where exactly, but basically, you know how sometimes you need to define a template file in order for the preprocess function to actually fire? It's something similar to that, as far as I can tell. So just make sure you have a page.template file. You're going to want it there anyway as a backup, because anytime, on any page rather, where you do not have a context defined to set a layout, you're still going to need some template file to serve as the default. That's about it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.